Hello, everyone, and welcome to GRID Live Encore alongside Kobe Lambeth, Podium Finish. I'm Ben Schneider. This is a brand new show from the GRID Network where we will be discussing lower-level development series and regional series that we don't usually get a chance to talk about on GRID Live Wrap-Up. I'm very excited for Brandon Crosslin to be joining us at GRID Network to co-host this show with me. Unfortunately, he had a schedule conflict tonight, so Kobe is filling in for him. Kobe, how are you doing? Thank you so much.
I'm doing great, Ben. Really excited to start our new Monday night show here at GRID Network, GRID Live Encore. If you can't get enough of GRID Live on the weekends, as I said last show, how about an encore? I think this is the perfect way to start off the week.
Yes, and we have some really big news out of the Xfinity Series. Kyle Busch is staying true to his word. He is done with the Xfinity Series, at least for now. He will not be competing in the series in 2022. Busch had previously said that he would step away from Xfinity once he reached 100 career series wins. The 2009 Xfinity champion entered 2021 on 97 wins and won all 5 of his allotted starts last season to bring his total to 102. Busch is on the record of saying never say never, but as of now, he is staying true to his word and taking a step back from the series. Busch does still own his Camping World Truck Series team, Kyle Busch Motorsports, where he is expected to make a handful of starts in 2022. So, Kobe, it seems like it's a good time to revisit the debate about Cup drivers racing in NASCAR's lower division. So we'll start this off with the first question here. Is this a good thing for the Xfinity Series, a bad thing, or do you think there are pros and cons to each side of the argument here?
Well, to be honest with you, Ben, I think there's pros and cons to each side of the argument. I mean, for starters, it's good to have Cup Series and Xfinity for the fact that sometimes they can help sell a sponsor for one race that can turn into a multi-race deal and help prolong the program moving forward. And I guess one of the biggest cons of the series is the obvious. We remember in the 2000s and when you had all of these Cup Series drivers running in the Xfinity race. At the time, it was called the NASCAR Busch Series, and they nicknamed those Cup drivers or invaders the Bushwhackers because they'd always come in there and really take the fight to the Xfinity drivers and won a huge chunk of the races. And as we got into the 2010s, it was the Kyle Busch show everywhere, running all these Xfinity races, dominating until NASCAR decided to put a limit on it, listening to the fans' feedback, frustration of seeing Kyle Busch, who's a full-time NASCAR Cup Series driver, going out there winning a large amount of NASCAR Xfinity races. And a lot of people felt like that was taken away from the regulars in the NASCAR Xfinity Series because they thought they weren't getting the experience they needed, like leading races, competing against one another. And with the Cup drivers blowing their doors off, they didn't really have a chance. But on the other side, some drivers in the Xfinity Series love racing the Cup drivers because they feel like it makes them better. As a driver, I remember Austin Cindric said that once. So if a driver is able to go door to door with Kyle Busch in the Xfinity Series and beat him, that makes them look really good for the future, especially if they're a young gun trying to get a full-time NASCAR Cup Series ride or an Xfinity driver looking to make the leap back up to the NASCAR Cup Series. So I definitely see both sides of the argument.
I usually see both sides too, and I think it's no secret to people that follow me on social media which side I ultimately find myself on. But I think in the case of Kyle Busch in particular, you take a look at his resume in the Xfinity Series. I think it's something like 97 of his 102 wins came after he became a full-time Cup Series driver. So if you look at it from a certain perspective here, that's 97 opportunities that an Xfinity Series regular would have had to go out and win an Xfinity race and make a name for themselves. And the whole slogan of a series is being made here. It's very difficult for me to reconcile that, and I don't care if it's Kyle Busch or whoever it is. When a Cup driver steps in and takes that opportunity, takes that ride for themselves, when they've already come in and made a name for themselves and made it to the Cup Series, I think that it's very difficult for me to take the name of the series or the slogan of a series rather seriously. So in Kyle Busch's case, I don't want to come off as me not appreciating what he has done in the series in his career. It's simply incredible to win over 100 races in any national series race. But I think the the thing with Kyle Busch is he was really the last one that was doing this to the absolute maximum he was allowed to. We've seen the limits come in. It was 10 races, I think it started when they put the limits on, and then it became 7, and now it's 5. I think Denny Hamlin usually does Darlington every year, and you maybe saw Keselowski or Logano do a couple of races with Penske here and there. But for the most part, it's been Busch, the main guy that we've been talking about here. It's kind of ironic that he got the name Bushwhacking. It came from the old sponsor of the Busch Series, and it ends up with a guy with that exact name who became most famous for doing it. So I get what the drivers say about wanting to measure themselves against the best of the best, but I think for the most part, I think back to the very first Busch Series race I ever watched. It was 2007 at Las Vegas, and there were 26 Cup regulars in the field that day, 27 if you want to throw in Regan Smith, who was part-time that year. That's 26 entries in that 43-car field that could have been used by, whether it's a series of a veteran trying to continue to race, who is experiencing a career revival, maybe something we're seeing right now with Justin Allgaier or AJ Allmendinger, or a young prospect trying to make a name for himself for the very first time, and they can't because a Cup driver is standing in their way of doing it. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how fans react to this, how drivers react to this, and we will still have Busch in the Truck Series, I guess, for the foreseeable future. We'll see where it goes from there.
Yes, it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here. I totally agree with you on the names are made here slogan, because if you have all these Cup drivers in the field, names are definitely not being made. You're not seeing those drivers who are Xfinity regulars going for the championship winning those races. And you mentioned those 97 wins. I can't help but wonder if we went back to looked at the results for all of those races, like the highest finish in Xfinity regular, how different things would be and how different things would have turned out in the driver's career. So I definitely see that side of the argument of Cup drivers taken away. And one thing I've always wondered, I know the 5 race limit right now for Cup drivers and Xfinity and trucks is very, very generous, but I wonder if in the future, if NASCAR is going to look at banning full-time Cup drivers from racing those series altogether, like not even a single race. I'm wondering, Ben, do you think that's something NASCAR should look into the future? It doesn't really seem like we're going to be seeing a lot of full-time drivers racing in Xfinity this year.
Well, I'm wondering if, like I said, the hope is maybe that Kyle Busch was the last guy that was doing this, and we might see with him stepping away, maybe NASCAR doesn't even have to do that because the problem takes care of itself. And I'll say this much to your other point here. I still remember, I did a video on it for my channel, actually. So that's why my memory is so good here. It's not like I just remember these random Busch races off the top of my head here. But I think it was Shane Huffman that day, and he finished in 9th place. And so that tells you there were 8 Cup drivers ahead of him in that race. So even if you take Jeff Burton won that race, Busch finished 2nd. It was a pretty exciting finish. Just take those 2 out of the equation. You still have multiple drivers you have to go through to get to your first series regular. So, for fans today that complain whenever Busch wins a race or steps down or we see a Cup driver pop up on an entry list, it really wasn't that long ago. You don't even have to go back a full decade, and you recognize that it at the very least is better than it was. Even when the rule came in that you had to declare which series you were going to run for points. Carl Edwards, I think, won 7 or 8 races in 2011, and a lot of times I remember sitting here as a young fan thinking, Ricky Stenhouse is finishing 2nd, and he's actually running for what was then at the time Nationwide Series points. I think a lot of those races he actually finished 2nd to Carl Edwards. So I'm the last guy to say that team order should be a thing, but it was kind of ironic to me that they instituted that rule, and you still had guys like Carl Edwards coming in and taking those wins away from drivers like Stenhouse at the time, or again, Elliott Sadler, a guy who was in Cup but was trying to remake his career in what was then the Nationwide Series. So again, like most issues, I can understand both sides of the coin, but I do think that the cons of it far outweigh the pros. And, it got particularly bad in Milwaukee later that year when you had Denny Hamlin get to the track late and Eric Almirola start the race. And I did a whole video on that one as well. That was certainly a messy situation. And I think maybe it was a wake up call for a lot of people as to just how bad it got in the mid to late 2000s. But we'll see. I still remember that. I think Atlanta was his last start last year. He said, never say never. So we'll see if Busch gets the itch becomes too bad. He has to scratch it again and go down there and continue to race. So, he's a competitor, so I'm not convinced that we've seen the last of him, but it is interesting to me that he is staying true to his word for this year, at least. And we'll see where it goes from there. And we'll see him in the Truck Series again as well. So who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, who knows what's going to happen. And I was looking at the NASCAR Xfinity Series entry list for Daytona. I think Xfinity, without the Cup drivers, it's going to be very, very competitive this year. I know we got a whopping 47 cars on the entry list for Daytona, and NASCAR added 2 more spots to the starting field. So instead of 36, it's going to be 38 entries, 47 cars. So we could definitely see some surprise drivers go home after qualifying. I think the Xfinity field is going to be stacked all season long, and I'm really happy to see practice and qualifying battle. Though practice is short, still got qualifying, and those teams who aren't far enough up on the owners points list, they're going to be really worried these first few races, try to get a good performance in so they can be locked in if something doesn't go their way in qualifying later on in the season.
Let me just add a follow-up question here. I know it's not in our script here, but you bring up a good point about the field sizes. And that goes along with the point we've been talking about Cup drivers taking spots away. NASCAR has taken some spots away in the last few years. It was a 43-car field. It's bounced down in between, got as low as 36. Now it's back up to 38. Of course, the purse sizes and winnings in terms of how much money is given out to each team through the purse, it hasn't been public for several years now. Would you rather see a 36 or 38-car field with more guaranteed money going to every team, or when you're dividing it up 38 ways, is it really not that big of a difference to expand to 40 or maybe even back so far as 43 and allow more teams the opportunity to race, even though they're getting slightly less money per spot?
Oh wow, that's really a tough question you asked, Ben. I'll be honest, I'm not exactly sure what the right answer to that question is, but I think the reason why NASCAR decided to add 2 more spots to the field, as I mentioned, gonna have a lot more teams trying to make the field this year. It's gonna be super competitive. So I know it would be a real shame, 36 spots, and then 47 drivers come, a lot more of them go home. To add two more spots, gonna have 2 more competitors, and just a couple of fewer drivers are gonna go home. But overall, it was a real interesting situation listening to some of the drivers who are the teams who are mid-pack teams, to your back markers talking about how it's such a big deal, with the field size, how when you add more like this, more people getting them slices of the pie, it can really hurt them financially, and obviously if you don't make the race, that's going to hurt you even more financially. So I'm not exactly sure what the correct answer is to that.
Yeah, again, I think there are pros and cons. You have to weigh to both. I remember Morgan Shepherd's team in particular was talking about that when they brought it back up to 40 cars with the pandemic and not being able to have practice and qualifying. So it's another interesting thing to consider here, and I guess for the Truck Series as well, with their field sizes having been tweaked over the years. So both entry lists look very, very strong. So it's going to be a debate that I think comes back this year, and we'll see how many teams or maybe just one-offs or part-time or decide to run the full season. So let's get into the Truck Series here a little bit and give a preview here. The Camping World Truck Series, of course, kicks off on Friday night. And we have a couple of new drivers in new places, as is usually the case. Particularly Thad Moffitt just recently announced that he will be making his Truck Series debut for Rayum Brothers Racing, driving the number 43 in a throwback scheme to, of course, his legendary grandfather, Richard Petty. So, Kobe, based on what we've seen from Thad Moffitt in the ARCA series so far, what do you think are some realistic expectations for him as he prepares to make his Truck Series debut?
I mean, being a Truck Series rookie, I think the best thing for Thad Moffitt is to get out there, get some more laps in the drive, get some experience, try to miss the wrecks that are obviously going to be inevitable at these super speedway tracks. And I think if Thad Moffitt runs all the laps, gets the experience, that's going to be a huge win for him. I know so far in it starts in the ARCA Menard series, he hasn't taken over and completely dominated a race yet. He has a few good finishes. He finished fourth last year in the points, and got a third place finish at Phoenix, fifth at Toledo, third at Mid Ohio, fifth at Pocono, fourth at Winchester. Although the field sizes in ARCA were small as last year, and some of the rounds were quite small, but I think that Moffitt, what we haven't really seen from him is to take over a race and completely dominate at that level, and considering what we've seen from him up to this point, that's why I think the best thing for him to do in this Truck Series debut is just to run all the laps and learn as much as he can.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the A goal kind of for somebody like Moffitt or anybody making their debut at a place such as Daytona is probably just to finish the race and gain as many laps and experiences as you possibly can. The way Daytona's gone the last couple of years, we've seen particularly Jordan Anderson comes to mind. He's finished second there the last 2 years. Who knows what could happen if you find yourself in the right place at the right time. But I think in terms of the A goal, it should probably just be to finish the race. And I see we have a comment in the chat here from our colleague Adam. Will we see a first-time winner in the Truck Series race or Xfinity Series race at Daytona? I don't know. Kobe, do you want to take that one first?
Oh yeah, I'm not sure if we're going to see a first-time winner, but I think the possibility that happen is definitely high because it's Daytona, for crying out loud. I know Larry Mack always says at these super speedway races, if your car will crank, then you have an opportunity to go out there and win that race. Yeah, looking at the entry, like you said, it's stacked in Xfinity and trucks. I think there's a chance always when you come to Daytona and Talladega, there's always an opportunity you're going to see a first-time winner. And remember at Talladega last fall, we saw first time winners in trucks, Xfinity, and Cup Series with Tate Fogelman winning the Truck Series. Brandon Brown got his first win, and then Bubba Wallace got the historic win. It all happened at Talladega. I believe that was the first time in NASCAR history that we saw first time winners in the 3 national series all on the same weekend, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it was at the same track.
At the same
for sure.
Track. Gotcha.
There might have actually been I'm trying to think. I think there was one weekend where Brett Moffitt won trucks and Kyle Larson won Michigan. That was their first wins. They got their first wins on the same weekend, but the Xfinity Series was at a different track. I think there might have been another that weekend, but
was it Mid Ohio?
It's not coming to it. It very well could have been a standalone track like that. Justin Marks, maybe I forget when Marks got his win, but yeah. So I think you're right. It was the first time that all three had been at the same track and gotten their wins. So if there's a place where it could happen again, it would certainly be a track like Daytona, very similar in nature. So, Corey Roper looked like he had a shot to win it. And of course, it's a shame he's not going to be on the entry list this year as we wait to see what his plans are for this season. But, anybody, like you said, I think anybody who cranks their engine at the start of the race, as long as they can hang in the draft and be there at the end, they're going to have a shot if the cards, if they play their cards right. So we'll see what happens. Now, one driver that had I would say, very surprising move to me in the Truck Series was Johnny Sauter. Sauter, of course, won a championship with GMS Racing. Has been with ThorSport multiple times in his career, and is now going to be part-time with Tim Veen's Glory to God, or G2G for short, racing team. And this is, like I said, very surprising, I think, for a lot of people. So, Kobe, I want to ask you, considering Sauter's coming from GMS and ThorSport and teams that compete for championships year in and year out, what do you make of this move from the 2016 truck champion, and what do you think we can expect from Sauter this season going to a team like this?
I said, well, I'm shocked in a way, and then again, I'm not shocked because the last couple of years for Johnny Sauter at ThorSport haven't exactly gone well. We haven't seen the same Johnny Sauter that we saw during that championship season, and it seemed like last year a whole bunch of things just completely went wrong for Sauter, and maybe a part of this move goes towards the business side of racing, where they didn't have enough sponsorship dollars at ThorSport to have Johnny Sauter on for another season, and we know ThorSport has a new driver running full time this year in the number 66 Toyota Tundra. That's Ty Majeski, who's really been bouncing around trying to get opportunities here and there to have a full time career in NASCAR and running for Toyota, TRD, and ThorSport. That's going to be a great opportunity for Ty Majeski to show what he can really do in NASCAR level competition. As for Johnny Sauter, with this move, running part time and ThorSport, gonna have Matt Crafton's championship winning crew chief on that ride. and it's really crazy because at the end of last season, Junior Joyner was retiring and going to California. Well, a few months passed. That's a really short retirement, so he's not really retiring at all. Junior Joyner is still going to be with ThorSport. I'm sure Johnny Sauter, once he's back over there at ThorSport in a much better truck, he's going to have to make sure he can capitalize on every opportunity to go to victory lane, because that's probably going to be his best shot at winning. And the new team that he's going to be driving for with Tim Vines' operation, we don't really know for sure what that equipment is going to be like. Maybe Johnny Sauter can do what we saw from Grant Enfinger last season when he ran part-time with ThorSport, and then when he wasn't in that number 98 Toyota, he was running that number 9 Chevrolet Silverado for Cody Robaugh, and Enfinger looked really good in that truck for Robaugh. So I think if Johnny Sauter in the races and not competing for ThorSport, if he's able to take the Tim Vines' truck and at least maybe try to run top 15, top 20, and I think that'll be a really solid day for him. And I'm wondering with these 2 part-time rides, are we and Johnny Sauter is not getting any younger. I'm wondering if we're getting closer towards the end of Johnny Sauter's racing career in NASCAR.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think back to I guess another example is kind of Nice Motorsports, and wasn't necessarily considered a top team in trucks until Ross Chastain got there. And Ross Chastain is, of course, a very talented driver. And when he came to Nice, they got a lot of backing from GMS and nearly won a championship when Ross started the year declared for Xfinity points. So you get the right combination of people aligning in the right way. You just never know how it's going to work out. So I think it's certainly a wait and see approach. When you start a brand new team or almost a brand new team and go from a championship caliber organization like that, it's hard for me not to look at that on paper and see it as a bit of a downgrade. But Johnny Sauter is the champion of our sport, and if there's anybody, I should say, that can turn a team like that into a contender very quickly, you got to think it's somebody like him.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a great opportunity for a championship winning driver like Johnny Sauter to go down to that operation, that brand new team in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series, and he can bring all of his years of experience and hopefully try to make that team more competitive throughout the season. And I'm sure Johnny knows there's probably going to be a lot of growing pains with that team, and there might be some frustration not running where he typically would run in a ThorSport truck. And I know with a lot of drivers who are used to being in race winning equipment and they go down to equipment that might be mid-tier or closer towards the back, it definitely takes some time adjusting to. I remember when Clint Boyer, before he went to Stewart-Haas Racing, ran a year with Harry Scott Motorsports. That was a really, really long, frustrating year for Clint Boyer because he was not used to racing where he was, and he was driving the car as hard as he could, but it just wasn't working.
Yeah, if you get a big name driving for a smaller team, sometimes it can lead to that team being elevated, I think, and other times you see it with that's a perfect example. Clint Boyer essentially having to sacrifice a year of his career when Michael Waltrip Racing shut down, but had to wait a year before he got the Stewart-Haas ride to open up. So I would certainly say Johnny Sauter's a big name, been around for a while. We'll see what he can do. Now, speaking of big names, I want to point out somebody that unfortunately isn't even on the Daytona entry list for the ARCA series, but certainly made some headlines at the test last month, and that is Frankie Muniz. And yes, that Frankie Muniz, the actor that's perhaps best known for Malcolm in the Middle, but he has been pursuing a racing career on and off for really almost the past 2 decades here. Muniz was a longtime competitor in Toyota's Celebrity Pro Invitational race and ran 3 seasons in the Atlantic Championship, maybe pursuing an IndyCar career at the end of the 2000s. And just last year, made his debut in stock cars in the SRL Pro Late Model Series. As I mentioned, Muniz is not currently on the entry list for Daytona. He said in an Instagram post that he was hoping to run the race in a good portion of the ARCA season, but sponsorship recently fell through, possibly because of the pandemic. Now, Kobe, to bring you back in here, I just want to get your perspective on this. How big of a deal would it be for ARCA, a series that doesn't have a lot of mainstream recognition, to have somebody like Frankie Muniz on the grid competing in an actual race?
Oh man, it was really disappointing when we got the word that Frankie was not going to be competing at Daytona. I remember when he did the open test at Daytona in January, a lot of people got really excited to potentially see a celebrity racing stock car. I know Frankie's been racing in the late models, really been into car racing for quite a long time, and I felt like it's not too late for him to race in ARCA this year. Maybe they'll get him to race at Talladega or maybe a short track somewhere if they're able to find sponsorship. But it's definitely frustrating that he wasn't able to be in this Daytona ARCA race because he's a big name. He's a celebrity, and I'm sure everybody wishes he was racing at Daytona. So when he's in the middle, or as Delta or Walter used to like to call the sucker hole, they're gonna be, look, there's Malcolm in the middle. I've already seen a lot of people make that joke, and we've already seen how celebrities have been able to impact racing, and the biggest celebrity / race car driver I can think of is Patrick Dempsey when he was racing in IMSA competition. And when Patrick Dempsey raced in IMSA, you saw a lot more eyes watch sports car racing and flock to that series just because they really love Patrick Dempsey and Grey's Anatomy. So I think there's a huge impact to have celebrities in series, and for ARCA, which doesn't typically get as much coverage as it deserves. I think if we had Frankie in the field, there would be a lot more eyes paying attention to ARCA. So hopefully he'll get the sponsorship stuff worked out later, and we can see him make his ARCA debut in future races.
Yeah, well, you bring up a good point. It's certainly not unprecedented. Every year we go to the Rolex 24 Daytona, and we're reminded of years that Paul Newman ran the race, Patrick Dempsey, like you mentioned, and even Tim Allen doing it a couple of times. It's very interesting to see how these races can sometimes bring celebrities out, not just as spectators, but they get the itch they want to scratch and decide to take it up for themselves and see how well they can do. And I remember Frankie was being interviewed last month, and he said it was very similar. He had a deal ready to do Indy Lights or IndyCar or something like that in 2010, and ended up having to take a step back from that. So it certainly is disappointing that we haven't gotten to see him actually in an ARCA race yet. But if he's there at a test, it's got to be on his mind that that's something he wants to do in the future. So hopefully he can find some sponsorship and find a way to get on the grid later this season. So let's stick with ARCA here a little bit and go to some news about one of the top teams in the series. Joe Gibbs Racing, their number 18 car was, of course, the most dominant in the series last year, has been for the last several years, particularly with Ty Gibbs. That team is now under new ownership. The 18 Toyota, previously owned by JGR, will now be run by Kyle Busch's team, Kyle Busch Motorsports. And they have tapped Sammy Smith, who, of course, competed for Gibbs last year, won the ARCA East Championship, to run in most of the events. He's not 18 yet. He doesn't turn 18 until June, but he will compete in all the events he is eligible for. Gibbs won the main ARCA Championship last year with Ty Gibbs, as well as the East Championship with Smith. So we know that they are a top team in or that KBM at least is inheriting a top team in the ARCA series. So Kobe, my question to you is, will KBM pick up right where JGR left off? Or is it going to take a little bit of time, as this is technically a new organization, new entity coming in, and they've never fielded an ARCA team before?
Yeah, before I answer your question, I wanted to add a part on what we just talked about, celebrities and drivers and racing. I was going to respond there, but it totally slipped my mind for a second what I was going to say.
That's
but
right,
I remember it. Yeah, I remember it now. A couple of years ago, San Antonio Spurs legendary point guard Tony Parker at one point said he wanted to get into racing, potentially with Porsche. How he wanted to race at his home race, the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And I'm not sure if Tony Parker is still interested in doing something like that, but I think it would be really cool to see an NBA legend racing in sports cars. That would definitely bring a lot more attention on the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Le Mans is already seeing a whole bunch of attention as it is, but Tony Parker racing in the GT class or whatever, that would be a huge deal for Circuit de la Sarthe. And now to answer the question about KBM basically taking over the JGR ARCA program, I actually don't think it's going to take a lot of time for them to get up to speed in ARCA competition. I'm sure it's, since JGR and KBM have such a close alliance, I'm sure Gibbs is going to I've already transferred all their notes over from ARCA to KBM and maybe keep some of the same people on board since they're in that close alliance. So I don't really think they're going to see them slow down at all. Ty Gibbs in that 18 car, wow, he was really special in ARCA competition, that dominating most of the races and completely blowing off a lot of the drivers' doors. And I think Sammy Smith is certainly a great prospect, and I feel like he's going to do some real special things in that 18 car as well in ARCA competition. So I think KBM's just gonna get the baton from JGR and keep running it back in ARCA.
Yeah, I think if we were talking about KBM kind of restarting their Xfinity Series team, it'd probably be one of those situations where, we expect it to take them a little while, particularly because they once had a Nationwide Series team back when it was the Nationwide Series. And, when you're dealing with organizations that, there's a lot more cup influence, especially back then, running those races and running in that series than there is in ARCA, where JGR was really the only cup team that had any sort of influence there. So I think you're absolutely right. KBM is probably going to pick up right where they left off. It's not going to take too long. And certainly Sammy Smith is a talented young prospect. Maybe not going to be quite as dominant from the start as Ty Gibbs was, although that is a very high bar that he set last year. But I certainly think Smith is going to be right up there competing for wins week in and week out with the rest of the top level teams and drivers in the series. And it's going to be interesting to see who they tap for the remainder of the schedule because, Smith will turn 18 this season, so it's not going to be a problem for them the entire year. But they do have some races to fill there, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah. So let's stick with ARCA a little bit here and talk about the preview the race in New Smyrna that kicks off the season for the ARCA Menards Series East tomorrow night, and the aforementioned Sammy Smith is on the entry list there for Kyle Busch Motorsports. And thinking back to last year, this was unbelievably the only ARCA East race that the former JGR 18 car did not win last year. Max Gutierrez, of course, took the victory in what was a thrilling 3-wide finish over Sammy Smith and Taylor Gray. So, Kobe, I want to ask you, can Gutierrez defend his win tomorrow night? Is Smith going to avenge his heartbreak from last year, or are we going to see a completely new face score an upset tomorrow?
I said, well, looking at this year's entry list compared to last year's, I'd say this year's field at New Smyrna is definitely a lot weaker because some of the drivers have already moved on to ARCA National or the top 3 NASCAR National Series, and some of the teams that we're used to seeing in this race are not entered this year. And I really, looking at the entry list, I think there's really 3 drivers that stand out to me that can be contenders for the win, and definitely one of them has to be Max Gutierrez. And the other drivers, as you mentioned, Sammy Smith and Taylor Gray, I really think in the top tier it's going to be between Sammy Smith and Taylor Gray, and then Max Gutierrez would be like tier 2, and after that, everyone else. But if I had to make a unofficial pick a winner, I'd definitely be willing to ride with Kyle Busch Motorsports driver Sammy Smith. I think he would be the favorite to win, but Taylor Gray has shown a lot of potential as well. Think he'll certainly give him a run for his money. And if chaos happens, kind of like last year, Max Gutierrez be there to swipe in and steal the win.
Yeah, I think definitely the 3 guys that were involved in the finish last year, they have to be your 3 favorites. But I think nobody was really expecting Gutierrez to come out of nowhere and steal the win last year. So you just never know what's going to happen. That's why you run the race. That 18 car has been so dominant in recent years. It's hard not to go with Sammy Smith. If I had to do a pick a winner too, that would certainly be my pick as well. But we'll see what happens. I know Gutierrez is certainly capable of pulling that off again, and Taylor Gray has won some races here and there as well. So we'll just have to wait and see as we get down to it tomorrow night. So that is going to do it for the debut episode of GRID Live Encore. Be sure to subscribe to the GRID Network here on YouTube. Follow us on all of our social media platforms as well: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Take 5 minutes after the show. Consider joining our Patreon. And a special thank you to those who have already invested: Colin, Deshelle, Mark, and Robin. Also, follow the link below to buy me a coffee, our one-time donation option. You can buy a coffee for your favorite on-air talent, and any amount will help us continue growing our motorsports media outlet. Also, be sure to visit public.com, the stock market social media home. The referral code in the link below gives you $5 to invest. Public.com allows you to connect with your friends, make new friends, and use tools to learn how to invest in the stock market. Wednesday night, we have Grid Tonight with Adam and Kobe. Thursday, Joe and Daniel will have their Women in Motorsports program. As always, join us for Grid Live pre-race on Saturday and Grid Live wrap-up on Sunday. Brandon and I will see you right back here Monday night for another episode of GRID Live Encore. For Kobe Lambeth, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you all for watching, and have a wonderful night.
Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform, public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a GRID Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest and start investing and networking on public.com.